We have Professor Amitabh Mattu, author and Professor Jawaharlal Nehru University, former advisor to Chief Minister and Chair Jammu and Kashmir Knowledge Initiative, joining us. Thank you, Professor Mattu, for joining us. You've been tracking J&K and politics for so long. So the government today has moved the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganisation Amendment Bill and other key bills pertaining to J&K. What I understand is that the bill reserves 2 seats for Kashmiri migrants and for people displaced from Pakistani-held territories of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, clearly, the Home Minister has also said that this is justice after 70 years for ethnic communities. How do you see this, sir, particularly because it comes after the abrogation of Article 370 and also after the delimitation process? Yes.
Yeah, I think you need to separate the 2019 J&K Reorganization Act, which abrogated 370 from this, although it's an amendment to that act, this bill which has been introduced into the Lok Sabha, because it does provide some progressive legislation, which I think is important to recognize. The Anglo-Indian community, for instance, in the Indian Parliament has been given 2 seats which are nominated by the President. Similarly, in this bill, it says that 2 members of the migrant community, without specifying any religion, region, those who had to move out of Kashmir because of violence and terrorism and disturbance, and who were registered, or even those who were not registered but stayed there because of government service, but still having movable property there, 2 people should be nominated, and those will be nominated by the governor, lieutenant governor in this case at the moment, and one of them should be a woman. Frankly, I don't see anything wrong. I think it incentivizes Kashmiri Pandits' involvement within the mainstream of politics in Jammu and Kashmir. It helps create the channels for a dialogue between Kashmiri Pandits and Kashmiri Muslims. Of course, as I said, it doesn't specify that the migrant nominated will be Kashmiri Pandits. So I think it's a progressive legislation which I support entirely. Right. The second is reservation for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. There were no reservations for scheduled tribes in the Act of 2019, and now you have 9 seats reserved for scheduled tribes like Gujars and Bakarwals, and 7 seats for scheduled castes. Finally, of course, there is the legislation which reserves 1 seat for all those who have had to leave Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Right. Through various phases from 47 to 71 because of either being forced out or facing threats and violence. So this legislation per se, I would not have any dispute, or I wouldn't think that it's a very controversial legislation. What, of course, is the expectation is that there will be elections, yes, and that eventually, as the Home Minister has assured the Parliament, that there will be a statehood given back to Jammu and Kashmir.
Right. Professor Mattu, I'll just come to the election bit, but clearly when you look at the other key bill on STs, it includes the Pahadi community and a handful of tribes in Jammu Kashmir's list of scheduled tribes. Now, Pahadis will now be able to contest reserved seats, which were previously, I understand, dominated by other tribes. So there's another bill that looks at inclusion of the Valmiki community. So, and another one that looks at, of course, the change in nomenclature, calling other backward classes, and this is something the Home Minister addressed today. So, what kind of electoral and socio-political impact are you looking at given this bill in context?
See, I mean, there are obviously accusations as whenever there is a reorganization of electoral constituencies and reservations that there is gerrymandering happening and that you are actually fiddling with constitutions in a way that would suit the powers that be. But as I said, once you took a decision that Pahadis would be also part of scheduled tribes on the basis of really linguistic distinctions, then there is a significant number of Gujars and Bakarwals and who have been demanding rights. And I think the seats reserved, which is 9, is in proportion to their total population within the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Similarly, SC seats, 7 seats, it anticipates that there would be, I would imagine, other communities which would be accorded that status, but includes the present number of scheduled castes who are already accorded that status. And 1 seat nominated for those who have been displaced from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is not really going to change the fortunes of this assembly. as I said, what most people hope is that this anticipates elections and finally statehood.
Right.
Within that, you can incentivize participation, you can incentivize dialogue, or you can incentivize perhaps communities that you feel will support you. But
Right.
ultimately, these things in the short term, you might think that these communities will side by you, but elections and politics in India and democracy in India has its own
Right.
logic.
Right.
And there is a self-generating momentum in terms of debate, dissent, and who represents whom in the ultimate analysis.
Right. Professor Mattu, my last question to you. Today the Home Minister spoke about cinema theatres in the valley. He also said that this is the only region with 2 AIIMS in India. So clearly there was a lot of focus on development, and I understand the government is doing a lot. But when you look at possibilities of elections, do you think that Jammu Kashmir is ready to host elections?
See, you can't make the argument that everything is normal and cinemas, there are people going to cinemas, there are tourist traffic, the footfall of tourists in all parts of the state has increased. You held showcase events like the G20 tourism ministers meeting in Kashmir, and then say there's still problems in holding elections. That doesn't hold water. So I hope that when the Home Minister suggested, as he did, that the development agenda is its centerpiece and there are things which are moving towards an accelerated phase of normalcy and development, he also is going to now announce elections. Hopefully, when the general elections in the rest of the country are announced, both parliamentary and state elections are held in Jammu and Kashmir. Ultimately, Jammu and Kashmir is beyond partisan politics. There are only 6 members of parliament, and the electoral stakes of national parties in Jammu and Kashmir are really very few directly. Of course, it does have a multiplier impact in other ways. So I think it's important now to reassure the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and it's not just people in the valley, but also in Jammu who want representation. After all, the greatness of India is celebrating diversity and democracy. And why should Jammu and Kashmir be denied that after 4 years after the reorganization happened? It's time that there are elections, and I fully support the progressive legislation for reservation of seats for Kashmiri migrants. And it does not, people might say this is a self-serving argument that I am a Kashmiri Pandit. It nowhere specifies any religion whatsoever. It just talks about people who have had to leave their home and hearths because of violence and terrorism within the valley.
Right. Thank you, Professor Mattu, for joining us. And